Well, welcome. I think we'll get started. Thank you all for being here. I know everyone has busy days ahead. Some people probably have already had busy mornings, so want to be respectful of everyone's time. Get going with some of our updates. We're really excited to be together virtually today to talk a little bit about some updates from the food group, but spend more of our time today just talking about the significant increase that we've all seen in food shelf visits throughout the state. And just talk about some of the important data about what's happening, some of the things that amazing partners are doing on the ground, and other ways that folks can get involved. So excited to have two guests joining our discussion today. We've got Colleen Moriarty, the Executive Director of Hunger Solutions, and we're doing a feature of Valley Outreach, one of our fantastic partners, a food shelf in the Stillwater area. So to start though, I just wanted to kind of reground us in an overview of the food group. Many of you are very familiar with what we do. I should mention too, feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll be doing questions at the end, so feel free to do questions, just type them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll have some time to raise hands at the end too. So, but just to reground everyone in what the food group does and who we are, we really believe in food for today and change for tomorrow. So we work hard to think about building a better food system, really centered on values of equity, access, nutrition, with an emphasis on local foods and culturally connected foods. We do that in three main ways. So we have our Big River Farms. It's a land-based education program for immigrant and refugee farmers. We've got our affordable grocery programs, Fair for All and Twin Cities Mobile Market. And we also have our hunger relief work, so supporting a network of over 200 food shelf programs, again, which we'll talk about a lot more today. So that's a brief overview of what we do. And then I just wanted to share some updates about some of our other program areas. Again, we'll spend most of our time today talking about the hunger landscape, some of the things that are really shaping the need right now on that side of our work. But didn't want to leave out some other updates of what's going on. So at Big River Farms, we are kicking into high gear with the growing season. So you can see that the greenhouse actually has green things in it. So that's always fun. It always feels like spring a little bit sooner out in the greenhouse at Big River Farms. We have our farmers, our classes for our education program out there start in January, with lots of crop planning, business planning, market development for all of the farmers in our program. But just this last week, we transitioned all the classes to hands-on out at the farm. So that's a really exciting time, getting in the fields and having everybody get ready. So that's what's happening over on the farm. And for anyone who hasn't been out there, let us know if you want to come out this summer. There's lots of opportunities to visit and tour or to volunteer. And it's really a beautiful spot. So those are some updates at Big River. We also have some fun things going on with our affordable grocery programs. With inflation still really pinching people's grocery budgets. Even though it's out of the headlines, right? We all know that it didn't go away, and we're certainly seeing lots of customers for both programs who are needing to stay more creative about how they're affording food, how they can continue to get the nutritious, good, culturally relevant foods that their families want. So working hard to open some new locations. We have 4 new Twin Cities mobile market stops in Minneapolis and St. Paul that we've opened this year. And we've also got 2 new Fair for All locations, including one in Norwood, Young America. And I think what we continue to see with Fair for All is it's a really good fit in some of those more exurban and rural locations where grocery access really is limited. So we had almost 100 folks come to our first Norwood, Young America Fair for All location. So we're also working to work on a capital campaign for some new buses for Twin Cities Mobile Market. So we're really excited to be purchasing propane-powered school buses, so they'll be more environmentally friendly. And our current buses are over 20 years old, which for a bus I've learned is really, really old. So grateful for all the support to upgrade those new buses. And also really working a lot in conversation with North Side partners in the North Side of Minneapolis knowing that the Aldi grocery store has closed, and really wanting to be in dialogue with all of our food shelf partners and other community partners doing work in that neighborhood to figure out if Twin Cities Mobile Market or Fair for All could be a helpful resource in that community too. So those are some updates on that side of our work. The last update I'll share before turning it over to our fabulous speaker is on our hunger relief side of our work. And so, you know, as we're going to hear today, the needs are off the charts. Food shelf visits, which we thought were at record highs before, are at way higher highs than they've ever been. And so the food group is working really hard in partnership with all of our over 200 food shelf and meal program partners to figure out how we can keep food really accessible. We're working to continue to emphasize culturally connected foods. So we just had a big packing event at our warehouse where we had volunteer groups come, and a lot of times people will pack boxes of food, and it's really great for volunteers, but it's not always exactly what our partner food shelves are looking for or what their participants are looking for. And so we worked really hard in partnership with participants and our food shelf partners to figure out what foods exactly were most in demand and how we could source and box those really in collaboration. And so we were excited to work on some boxes that were focused on the Latinx community, the Southeast Asian community, and the Indigenous community. And also working to source products from producers from those communities as well. So that's a bit of an update. We're also ramping up our local food purchasing. We've got some folks from the Department of Agriculture here. So excited when we can use our buying power, both from our Big River Farms farmers and other Minnesota farmers to get that food to our partners. So those are some updates of what's happening at the food group. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen Moriarty. She's the Executive Director of Hunger Solutions. Hunger Solutions is a really critical partner in terms of doing advocacy and public policy work around hunger, and also helping us understand what is the state of hunger in Minnesota and how do we tell that story. So they collect data, they work with food shelves throughout the entire state, and again, work with a lot of decision makers at the state and national level. So I will turn it over to Colleen.
Thanks, Sophia. It's great to see everybody today. This has to be the best picture that I've ever seen. And that it was a joyous day. It was the day that the governor signed the free school meals bill and really made it the law. And it was at an elementary school, and the kids, first of all, they formed a line for him to run through, like, you know, like a football player entering the field, and they gave him high fives. And then they came and surrounded him, and he explained to them what it was he was doing. And then they were, you know, they loved every bit of it. And it was really a celebration. It was a celebration in my career of 17 years of working towards free meals. We had fits and starts along the way. And really, I'm telling you that story because that is the story of public policy. One step up, two steps back, one step up, two steps back. So we had lunch shaming legislation. We had other kinds of strategies that addressed meals in the schools, but we knew that universal meals was the ultimate goal. And so with the partners, we went for it. This, like everything else at Hunger Solutions, is a focus that comes from the ground up. We assembled partners and interested people in the fall to develop an advocacy agenda for the state. And that really gives us the way forward. Another thing, though, you can go to the next slide. Another thing that we really focused on right off the bat in the beginning of this session was the dramatic increases at food shelves. We saw that there was just an unbelievable moving forward of all of the needs across the whole state. And we knew that unless there was some emergency funding that was made available, that people were going to have a hard time keeping the shelves stocked and keeping enough food in the local community to serve people. So we went to the legislature and asked for emergency funding of $5 million to go to the food shelves. And that, I think, is going out this week to the food shelves. And it's very significant because the whole food shelf program for a biennium is only 2.4 million. So we were asking for, a lot more to serve this need. And it was a bipartisan bill, as was the universal meals. And it really, got the support of the legislature, which, and the House side, it passed almost unanimously, except for one vote. So it was, and you might guess who that was or not, but there was a dramatic, people know, legislators know their local communities. And when they hear from you in your local community about the needs on the ground, they're much more likely to take action. We can go out and talk about the need, as we'll talk about today, but unless they hear from you, it would be, it won't stick. That's why we have Hunger Day on the Hill. That's why we send you action alerts. That's why we're constantly in touch with the shelves and programs to make sure that that this is, these are the things that are on the ground. These are the struggles that people would deal with. You'll see that in 2022, there's 5.5 million visits, an increase, or 5.5 million visits total, and that was an increase of 1.9 million since 2021. What's happening? What's happening is this: there were supports that were afforded by the federal government during COVID, they had blinked off. There was emergency SNAP, which brought you up to the highest level of your eligibility, that blinked off. We're going to see now waivers blink off on a continuing basis because they're rolling back the supports that were there for families. And what's left is, we were able to control kind of the visits to food shelves by having the unemployment insurance and all of these other supports. And once they were gone, the one and only source in many cases is the food shelf. So it's tremendous pressure on the programs. Hennepin County averages are at 63,696. And, that there's just so many food shelf visits that we can't even get to. And we see that, I think there was a 23% increase just in the last month. So it's, it's not, there's no downward slide for this. We're really looking at a remarkable time of need. And these are the counties with the highest increase. Some of them are just, outside the metro area. And some of them are in southern Minnesota. A lot of these are in southern Minnesota, except for, of course, Itasca. You can see on the map the gradations of where the increases are. And we have county-specific numbers, and we make those available to the senators and the legislators so that they can see what's really happening at their local community. Next. The loss of food support, the loss of pandemic EBT, that's really driven a lot of people to the point where they really don't have access to the kinds of foods that they need for their families. Stimulus payments, tax credits, universal meals blinked off. That was one of the things we used in our discussion about universal meals. Was we knew how to do it. We had just been doing it for 2 years. So it wasn't as if it was a great mystery. But the emergency SNAP, I think, was, despite how many times we've all tried as partners to get that message out, it's still a shock for persons who are elderly in particular to see their grant for food for SNAP go from $200 to $23. And we have the Minnesota Food Helpline at Hunger Solutions, and we get a lot of calls from people saying, why did you do this? This is so horrible. How could you do this? They don't, the whole complex system of what comes from the federal government, what comes from the state, what the waivers are, all of that, all that people know is it went from $200 to $23, and they want to know why. So we have to have more resources available. And I strongly just believe so strongly in the wholesale groceries, in the the programs like that you offer at the food group, because that's another avenue. That's another way for people to get what they need, and we need to have more options available to people, because the hunger relief system as it's set up now is not set up to deal with these kinds of numbers. So this is the cost of inflation that you're all well aware of, although it is, creeping down. But, all the economists have talked about the fact that it's going to be a slow It's a slow decline. It's not, it's not rapid like it was in the increase. So we're going to look for these kinds of needs to continue. We compare all of this because we're looking at all times for trends where certain areas of the state are experiencing need. The rising food prices, of course, had a dramatic effect on the people's ability to be able to have enough food for themselves and their families. And you can see that it is coming down, but it just takes a natural disaster to really put us in a position where, again, we'll be in crisis. So next.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So Colleen will stay with us because I'm sure there's lots of questions. A couple questions in the chat to just highlight that this is all Minnesota data.
Right.
Yes, 5.5 million food shelf visits in our state alone in 2022. And then Matt, I see your question about our affordable grocery numbers included in this data, and they are not. So these are all food shelves. So places that individuals are going to get food free of charge from fabulous partners. And so with that, I want to urge everyone to sign up for action alerts from Hunger Solutions Minnesota. So they are, again, our go-to partner for tracking what's happening on the anti-hunger side of our work for legislation and opportunities to really help folks. And so please, Laura put the link in the chat to their action alert. So if you are interested in staying kind of informed and engaged in that way, please sign up there. And what we're going to do next is see a brief video from one of our fabulous food shelf partners. And we saw in Colleen's data that Washington County was on the list of one of the highest counties of increase for food shelf visits, and Valley Outreach has seen that firsthand. So we're going to take a tour with Jess. And Jess works with a fabulous team of folks, including Tracy Mackey and Liz Riley and so many great folks at Valley. So Jess is going to tell us a little bit more about what they're seeing.
This is our super shelf, where recently we served nearly 1,000 families just a few weeks ago. During the pandemic and before the pandemic, we were serving an average of about 350 households per week. So we've seen almost more than double the number of households coming in who need support, especially with food. We intentionally try to make it feel like a welcoming and safe, comfortable place for people to come, regardless of if you're coming in for food because you need assistance, you're a volunteer, you're a donor, you're a community member. We want everyone to feel welcome here at Valley Outreach and that they're part of the community. Our coolers and then our freezer section, we're really happy with these. We got these during the pandemic period when we remodeled our food shelf to expand the space and to open it up to be a little bit more flexible. All of the condiments are a really popular way to make all the healthy food that we have in the food shelf taste good and taste familiar. So if you can accessorize your food to a way that makes your palate happy, that makes us happy. One example of how we've been affected by inflation and other systemic issues is the egg shortage that all consumers experienced. However, we've had challenges procuring eggs just due to a lack of availability. And eggs are an important part of our super shelf food program, but if they're not there or not available, they're not available. So what do? Our food team has been incredibly adaptive in featuring and highlighting other proteins to substitute for eggs. And it looks like right now we don't have any eggs in our inventory. So a very real and current issue that we're experiencing as we try to meet the needs of a rising number of community members. One thing we've noticed over the past several months is that as different pandemic era programs have come to an end, there definitely seems to be a correlation between the number of visitors we're seeing and the end of those programs. So things like emergency SNAP benefits ending. Certainly with the end of Rent Help Minnesota, we saw an increase of people needing help with food and access to housing supports. And we're seeing a lot of new people who are coming to Valley Outreach who are new to our programs, new to coming to Valley Outreach, and many people who are new to the state. We had an individual come visit us from Rochester because they said that they didn't have programs that met their specific needs. And they came up and they received a large box of food, and they were very happy to have that. And we recognize that that's not a feel-good story, that we were happy to be able to help the person in the moment, but to us it shows that there's a big problem system-wide in being able to help people get the resources that they need. And we're really happy to be part of the community in Minnesota who's working really hard to help address those challenges, because we're all in it together.
Thank you, Jess, for being willing to share your time and expertise with us. And as you can see, Valley is experiencing those dramatic increases that we're seeing in the statewide data as well. So, it's sometimes helpful to see what it's looking like in local communities, right? And that's what it's looking like in local communities, throughout the state. And certainly the story that we're hearing from all 200 of our partners. These double, tripling of numbers. And I think it's an interesting moment too, because there was so much attention paid to hunger work during the height of COVID. And that was really important, right? People did have a lot of needs, but I think it's the story now that we need to tell, which is actually the numbers are much, much higher now than they were at the height of the pandemic. And so how we can continue to share that story with folks in our networks and continue to support the great work that so many food shelves and meal programs are doing without some of the federal supports that did exist kind of as a result of the pandemic. So thank you to Jess and the team at Valley Outreach. Some of them are on the call too. So if people have questions for me, for folks from Valley, for Colleen, definitely feel free to put them in the chat, or if anyone wants to raise their hand, that's an option too. So there's a question in the chat around, is everything free at food shelves, or is there an option to donate? So food shelves are completely free for participants. So that's something that's really important and core to kind of how the system is set up, that no one is ever asked to pay for anything at a food shelf, that everything is given for free. There are definitely other programs, right? Like our Fair for All program or Twin Cities Mobile Market, where folks can purchase foods. And certainly, some folks who use food shelves decide that they want to volunteer, right, to help. Or there's lots of stories of folks who use a food shelf, to get through a tough time and then end up becoming, a donor to that program later on, or those kind of things. So, there's lots of different ways that folks interact and give back. But all the food that is distributed through food shelves in our network is given for free. What other questions do people have? Okay, we've got another question around the most urgent policy change that you're focusing on next. So I'm going to give that one to Colleen.
The question is a really good one. We're currently, the legislative session is still going on, and we work together with other poverty issues like paid family leave, childcare. There's a lot of, surrounding services to food. Food isn't the only issue that brings people many times to the food shelves. So we're working on that. As far as next year, we're beginning to craft an agenda that includes bringing the minimum benefit up to $95 from $23, which will be significant for the senior population. In addition to that, we're looking for the implementation of the universal meals to be one that is smooth and helpful to families, and we'll be monitoring that. As far as what's next, we're waiting to hear from the people we work with about what they think is next, but we'll bring those issues forward. Sophia and I are going to Washington next week to really have conversations with our colleagues to see what is working on the national level and where the challenges are, and we'll be on the cutting edge of that, you can be sure.
I see a question around screening for eligibility. I'm wondering, I don't fully know. I'd love a little more detail. So if more, do you want to unmute and say more about that question?
Yes, I know certainly some people are in critical need of food and others just to supplement what they have. And I expect it's pretty much on the honor system, but do we question anybody who comes in? You know, somebody with a Gucci bag and fancy shoes and comes to the food shelf, etc. Is there any way of trying to allocate the resources, the limited resources that we have, to those who are truly in need?
Yeah.
You know, I could answer one part of that,
Sure.
and that is everybody who is eligible for federal commodities, which are distributed and really a backbone of the food shelf system, self-declare their income eligibility. I don't think it's very often we see people with Gucci bags in food shelves. And I think that if somebody visits more than one food shelf, they're really in need. We're not the food police. We're there to help people.
Yeah, I was going to share that, I think what is true is that so many local food shelves develop really good relationships with folks that are coming in to access services, right? So there's a lot of options. There's a lot of wraparound services offered too. So most of our partners, including Valley, there's social workers there so that when someone's coming in, they can chat about what's going on, what are the elements that are making them be in this position where they're not able to make ends meet. And I think, what is so interesting right now is because of inflation, it is a lot of folks who are working jobs that in the past were sufficient to not need a social safety net, right? But there's been a lot of shifts and changes. And so, again, I think that's a question that comes up a lot. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But I think when we are out visiting and seeing food shelves and chatting with folks who are going, it's really hard to ask for help. And so it really actually continues to take a lot of courage for most of the folks who are going to food shelves to say, I'm not in a position where I actually can feed my kids what they need. It's an incredibly humbling experience. And so, our partners do a great job at allocating resources well and being good stewards of that, something we all take really seriously, but really tends not to be a widespread issue at all. There's another question from, let's see, Perry from White Bear about insights for what's coming. If I knew, I don't know, be charging people lots of money for my insights, right? No, I don't know what's coming. I think, we've been in this really interesting position where every year for the last, I would say 4 years, that we have faced some unprecedented challenge in the hunger relief space. And I think everyone has agreed that we're not in the place of catching our breath yet, that these numbers remain unprecedented. And so, I think time will tell. What to me is the most heartening piece of the whole thing is that partners continue to be nimble and the community continues to step up to support the work. So in interest of everyone's time, I know you're all busy. I'm going to have Emily just kind of wrap us up and we'll keep the conversation going.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Emily White, Director of Advancement and Culture here at the Food Group. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and starting your day with us. Of all of the things that you could be doing, we so appreciate your time and interest in joining us. We have so many different types of supporters and you're so important to this work and make it happen. Thanks to Colleen and Jess and Sophia for all speaking today, and then Jadea and Laura on our team for helping to coordinate and do the visuals and all the communication. So as we close, we want to invite you to support this work or continue supporting this work. It is powered by volunteers and donors. You make it possible. So there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. You can donate. We do have a match right now at the food group, a $30,000 match. So you can make your support go further. You can make a gift online or send us a check. And if you're interested specifically in what Sophia mentioned about Twin Cities Mobile Market and the capital campaign, please reach out. That's something that we're focused on right now as well. You can also volunteer. Right now we're gearing up with seasonal opportunities. So have opportunities gleaning at our farm as well, rescuing food at farmers markets too. So a lot of great opportunities coming up to get outside and get involved, as well as packing and sorting food at our warehouse. We also have an open house coming up May 18th from 5 to 7, open to anyone interested. We'd love to have you here in New Hope at our food warehouse and offices. And then also get involved with your local food shelf, like Valley Outreach, or if you want to know which food shelf is in your area, please reach out. We'd love to connect you and advocate with Hunger Solutions. There's so many great partners and we're all working together. So thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your support so much. Have a good rest of your day.